All right, thank you everybody here in the library and everyone online for joining us for our brown bag. This is Kristina Harguth, and she works for NOAA's Printing and Duplication Services.
Logistics Management
Logistics Management Branch, okay. And we actually had her and her team come and talk to us last week. Really excited to have her here to talk to everybody. There's some really great services, and I'll let her take it away. Thank you for joining us today.
All right. Thank you, Trevor. As Trevor said, my name is Kristina Harguth, and I work in the Logistics Management Branch, which is underneath the Logistics Operation Division, falling under the purview of the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer. So we do a variety of things, including what we're going to talk about today, which is printing and duplicating. But we cover mail management, fleet management, copier justifications, and a variety of other services. But today I'm going to talk specifically about printing and duplicating. All right, so we offer more than just making copies. And many of you already know this, but just to go briefly over it, so we can do all types of printed material. So that's books, brochures, handouts, posters, rack cards, business cards, anything like that. We can also do stickers, placards, metal signs, posters, awards and certificates, and then various promotional materials. We also offer a variety of paper types, including what a lot of you use, especially on the ships, that really hardy, tear-proof, waterproof, so we can coordinate all of that. One of the things that a lot of people don't know is we also offer very robust publishing services. So that's a variety of digital content solutions. So that includes scanning hard copy materials, material distribution and dissemination, warehousing, converting books to ebooks, graphic design, digital media, and then also digital content cleanup, optimization, and migration. So until recently, the process was a little bit ambiguous in terms of what form you submit and who you submit it to. And so in reaction to a lot of feedback, we launched something that we're calling the Specification Sheet, more formally known as the LMB Printing and Duplicating Request Form. And it is completely electronic. It's a Google form. And you can find the link on our webpage, or, and I don't know, Trevor, is this going to be distributed electronically, the slideshow? So when the slideshow is delivered electronically, there's also a link to the form within the slideshow. So currently we have specific options on the spec sheet for just getting an estimate. So if you're not ready to place your job yet and you just want to know how much it would cost, we can do that. Your normal printing and duplicating, so posters, books, booklets, stickers, all of that. Your official Department of Commerce retirement certificates, and I'll do a brief caveat here, like if you just want certificates of appreciation or recognition, that would go through the standard printing and duplicating option. This is just for retirement certificates that are signed by the department. We can also accept scanning requests specifically, the 2019-20, 2020 scheduling sheets, deposit accounts, journal article waiver requests, and then we kind of have this catch-all printing and publishing services. And I am going to take a brief aside here and show you kind of what the form looks like. So like I said, it's a Google form, and so it's going to automatically collect your email address. We're outside the domain, so it's having me type it in. So you won't normally have to do that. But on every request, you're basically going to put in your name, phone number, line office, program office. And then you're going to have this drop down, which is these options that I just went over. And what I have for everyone in person, I have a copy if you want one. It's also available on our website. It's linked on the spec sheet. And then it'll be distributed when we distribute the electronic materials, a help guide that goes into detail what you should select in what circumstances for each one of these. We'll just do this journal article waiver request because it's a frequent one. And it's one of our newer services that we offer through the spec sheet. So once you click the appropriate option, it's going to route you directly to the questions that are specific to that request type. So you're not going to have to wade through tons of printing questions if you just need a journal article waiver. So then you would just put in what you want, go through all of these questions, and then you would submit the form. And then what happens from there, I'll go back to here. What did my clicker? There's no clicker. So once you submit it, and this is true for all request types, I showed you specifically the journal article, but this is going to happen with any of them. You're going to submit the form, and you're going to get a PDF, what we call the spec sheet, attached to an email confirming that you submitted it. That same spec sheet, along with any documents you attached, goes to our print shop team. They're going to evaluate it, look at the specifications, look at the requirements, look at our procurement options, and then they're going to route it to the specialist who's going to handle it. And all of that usually happens within a few hours, but within 24 hours, you will for sure hear from, or one workday, I should be more specific. You won't hear over the weekend. Within one workday, you'll hear from your assigned specialist or from our gatekeeper asking for additional clarification if clarification is required to determine the procurement method that's going to be used for your job. If you don't hear from somebody within one business day, you're going to follow up with this NOAA printing and then CC me, and I'll give you my contact information at the end of this email. And like I said, I have help guides here, and they walk through every question that's on the spec sheet for every option, in addition to giving you just some general guidance on the process and using the guide and the form. Also has pictures of the types of bindings, the types of folds, but if you still find that you are struggling with the spec sheet form or you don't know what option to choose, you can always email that the noaa.printing@noaa.gov or give me a phone call, and we will get you squared away and sorted out and get you all the help you need. And then we will never release a job for production without checking with you on the specs. So it's not like you're going to submit this spec sheet and then it's magically going to go out through production and you're not going to know pricing, you're not going to be able to finalize. So if you don't know an answer on the spec sheet, you can always put unknown or ask a question in the special remarks. It's not the be-all, end-all. It is definitely a living, breathing document from which we'll build your official form that goes to the vendor or in the in-house. In terms of pricing, so we are always on your side in terms of being good stewards of appropriated funds. The caveat to that is printing services are governed by a set of regulations issued by the Joint Committee on Printing that provide us specific procurement vehicles that we're allowed to use for jobs. So overall, the government leverages economies of scale, meaning for the entire government and even NOAA really, you're going to get more economic options for printing. What that does mean is because of the variability of the commercial market, you may be able to go out on the commercial market and get, a quote that's substantially lower, not even substantially, might be lower than what we can get for you in-house. And that's just the reality of the regulations that we live under. And we will always seek other quotes if the quote we get back just is above your budget or you're not comfortable with it. We'll explore all of our options and make sure that we are getting a fair market value for that. And then, like I already said, jobs will never be released for production without your approval of the specifications, as well as a chance for your budget certifier to look at the estimates and sign off on that. So there is that. All right, and then a special option is your business card request. And currently, business cards are not covered by this process. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear. Again, on our webpage, there's a business card link that'll give you instructions on how you fill that out. And they are collected throughout the week and batched on Fridays. So we don't send them out onesies, twosies, and again, that's at economies of scale. The costs vary. We get volume pricing. So if we have above a certain threshold, we get a discount on the cards. So we batch them, send them out. It's 7 to 10 days from the order date to receive them. And then surcharges and shipping is dispersed across the batch. So the pricing is somewhat variable, but your specialist who collects your order can absolutely give you what your max cost is going to be. We do rush requests. We don't recommend them because that they can get very expensive very quickly because we lose that volume discount in addition to you having to carry the entire shipping and surcharge burden for that set of cards. So we can absolutely do it and we'll fulfill that need. 2 to 3 business days is the turnaround on rush requests, but you will pay for that convenience for sure. All right. And then I know we've talked a little bit about the spec sheet and how journal article waiver requests work, but I also wanted to touch briefly on there's some ambiguity about when you need a journal article waiver. So the JCP governs that, or says that any printing or publishing, duplicating that is done using appropriated funds has to be coordinated through GPO or a GPO approved channel. So that's our in-house plant, that's the vendors that have been approved by GPO, that's GPO itself. There is a waiver that has been issued for commercial journals. So that's your scientific journals, your encyclopedias, your textbooks, things like that. If there is no cost associated with it or non-appropriated funds, whether that's a grant with the university partnership or something like that, if there's no appropriated funds, you do not need a waiver to publish. The waiver is only if you're going to use appropriated funds to pay for the journal article or the page charges or the open access. However, you are still responsible for notifying intent to publish, which we'll talk a little bit about what that is in a sec. The GPO form 3868 is what that falls under. You're still required to notify them, and you may still need to get a publication clearance from both our office and the Office of Public Affairs. And so as we saw on the spec sheet, you can request a waiver through that, the spec sheet, like you would any other printing request. And that submission must include the notification of intent to publish, the publication clearance request, a copy of the invoice, and if you don't have an official invoice, something from the vendor that indicates an estimate or a breakdown of charges. We need something verifying what it's going to cost. And then we also request at least the first 5 pages of the manuscript. It can be a draft Word document. It doesn't have to be the final typeset, perfect, what's going to be published. We just need to see the first few pages of the journal article. And all of that leads into the FDL Key, which is the Federal Depository Library Program. So how that relates to journal articles, the reason that they need the first 5 pages of the manuscript is it helps them determine whether they want copies of that. And what they do is they collect publications. In fact, the NOAA library is an FDLP library, so they participate in this program. And they collect certain classes of documents and they maintain them so that they're available long after they've been phased out of standard libraries or fallen off of our webpage. So it's kind of a permanent record of government publications, budget proposals, reports to Congress, those types of things. So this notification of the intent to publish allows them to look at what we're printing, what we're publishing, and decide whether that's something that they think should be enshrined in the Library of Congress and then distributed to FDLP libraries as well. And part of that process is GPO subscriptions, and GPO sales also has a chance to look at that order through that one process and determine whether they want copies as well. And then to reduce the costs, because most printers do volume pricing. So 50,000 copies of a document is not necessarily going to be automatically double 25,000. It might be 30% higher because there's that whole setup overhead piece of it. So to reduce the cost of reproducing those, GPO will ride existing print orders. So we send it to them. They say, yes, we want 15 copies, and then we tack that on to your order, and GPO picks up the bill for that. So for orders that are coordinated through our office, we submit to the FDL Key for you. For anything that you procure outside of our office, so like a journal article waiver, where you publish to a commercial journal, you are responsible for notifying FDLP. And if you look at the form 3868, there's an email address. You just submit the form to the email address, and usually within a couple hours, they'll tell you yes or no whether they want copies. So that is the reason that we ask for a lot of the stuff we ask for up front. Is it available online? Who's the audience? How frequently are you going to publish it? We ask for manuscripts and documents. So a lot of those things that we're asking for are to help them decide whether that's something that they're going to publish. And then here are our points of contact. So the NOAA printing officer is the LMB branch chief, and that's Angela McCorkle. I am the LMB printing and duplicating program coordinator, Kristina Harguth, and that's my email address up there. And then my backup is Susan Bloomer. Many of you are familiar with her. She led the program for years, and then we've recently flip-flopped on roles there. And then the LMB print shop email is listed on the slide, as well as the business card email. And those are going to be your best resources for ensuring that your message is seen. If somebody's out at the office and you email an individual, might be a day or two delay. But if you email the generic inboxes, somebody's always monitoring those. And then for those of you in the room, I've got samples of different types of products that we can do. If you guys want to take a look at them, I'll put them on the table back here, as well as the help guides for the spec sheet. And then I guess now we'll open it up for questions. Yes.
I have a couple of questions because in my office we process a lot of publications, and the publications go through AMS, John Wiley, and sometimes there may be an off vendor. So now that the process has changed, my authors will have to, I'm assuming, create their own Google form, because they will know the specs, right?
Yes. So the question is, for journal articles, the individual asking the question has a section that does a lot of them. Manuscripts. Do the authors need to create their own Google Forms for each publication? So if there's a cost attached, if the vendor is charging you for open access or for page charges, yes, you'll need a waiver, and that's for your purchase card or your C request file. That's part of your documentation for your finance side. The waiver is required for that. It doesn't necessarily need to be the author that submits it. As you can see here, it's pretty basic information that's required. So the publication title, article title, the author, authors, publishing company, estimated cost. So if it's your authors that know the specs best and that's how you want to do it, that's absolutely at your discretion. This is available to anybody who's inside the NOAA domain and who knows the information. And then I would also caveat that if the submitter isn't the person that you want getting the signed waiver and paperwork back, that you indicate that in the requester so that the team can make sure it's routed back to the appropriate individual.
So you said credit card or C request?
Yes.
So if we process, let's say, every year a contract through AMS, so are you saying now that we will have to go into this Google form and because cost is associated in your various publications within this contract, we will have to create information into this form for contracts or just general?
I'm gonna let Angela answer this question.
So the Google form is specifically if you need the waiver. I wanted to caveat something you said and point out that our process to gather the data needed has changed, but the requirements to do some of the requirements have not changed. So I just want to be clear on that because there should be an audit trail for everything that you do and applications and incentive coverage and FDL Key if it does not come through us. That should be ongoing. If it comes to us, then we take care of it.
So when do we load up the CD27 and the waiver form and the intent to publish? After the specialists have been assigned, it will require those documents? Because normally we submit them for signature to Robert Whitted and then to Mr. Slack, the Commerce, and then they send them back to us and we process it. When do we upload those forms?
So instead of sending them to Mr. Whitted, you would submit them through here. So, and for people online, I'll repeat all of this in just a second. Yes, so where you used to send, and this is true for all of these request types, where you used to send it to the individual specialist, so whether that's Mr. Whitted or Mr. Pearson or Mr. Wilson, now instead of submitting it directly to an individual, you submit it through this form. So the question was, for people who use contracts with publication companies and do several publications against that, at what point do you need to submit the journal article waiver? And it would be the same process. The printing officer inserted that none of our requirements have changed, just the way that we gather the information has changed. So instead of emailing the specialist or instead of just emailing the specialist, you would just do the spec sheet instead. So same process, just insert the spec sheet where you were emailing the specialist, the SF1 or the 50-5A or the CD27. So instead of sending them to the specialist, you would just submit them through the spec sheet instead.
So the spec sheet comes from the specialist, and once I put this information in and then I wait for 24 hours or a regular work day, then the specialist will come to me and ask general questions or questions that they need, as well as I would need to submit to them those forms. Correct or no?
Correct. So the form allows, she's asking about submitting the forms with the request. So the Google form allows you to submit all of the required documents within the form itself. So here you can see you can add files to your request. So you would just upload your CD27, your 3868, your manuscript, and your invoice, or your contract, for example, here. And then if there's no gap in your paperwork and there's no follow-up needed, within that 24 hours, you're just going to get your signed waiver back. They might communicate with you a little bit if there's some clarification needed, but if you submit everything here, it's a very quick process.
Will the CD27 have to have the account?
The CD, we do not require accounting for journal article waiver requests. That is because you're not going through us and we're not charging it back. We do not request accounting on any journal article waivers. That is not true for the other request types, so I want to make that really clear. But for journal article, there is no accounting required for us to sign the waiver or the CD27. What public affairs requires or what your AGO requires, that is outside of our purview, but for our purposes, no, accounting is not required.
There's a question online related. will we get a receipt or a signature back after we submit? I've always filed Mr. Whitt's signed copy with the purchase paperwork.
Yes, when you submit it, you'll get the confirmation email that it's been submitted, and then once we get the estimates back, you'll receive a copy of the paperwork to have your budget certifier sign, and then as soon as that's processed by our office, whether that's Mr. Whitted, myself, Susan Bloomer, whoever signs that GPO copy, your specialist should also be sending you a copy of that signed form that has, your costs with GPO surcharges. If you don't, follow up with your specialist, because that should be a follow-through that you receive.
Some of my publications come from the procurement section of my office, and some of the publications are charged with bank cards because they're less than $3,500. And in reading the policies and procedures on your website, it says that you are not allowed to procure printing or duplicating or publish article with the charge of our credit card. We must receive a waiver. So are there various waivers other than the waiver that we submit that Robert Willis signs? Is that a separate waiver?
No. So the question is, on our website it says that printing and duplicating cannot be procured with a government purchase card, which is true with the exception of the commercial journals, encyclopedias, textbooks, and things like that, and it is just one waiver. So the same process where you were sending the CD27, the 3868, for journal articles, you can use the purchase card once you have your signed waiver. So that waiver is good whether you're using a purchase card, whether you're using a C request, whether you're doing a contract. That waiver is the same. The process is the same regardless of what payment method you ultimately use to fulfill the order.
I do have a question online. There are a lot of required fields and need to be completed when the order is for something as simple as envelopes. Is there a way to avoid having to answer questions that don't pertain to the order?
So my response to that one would be there is the special printing and duplicating request option. It's the last option on the drop-down menu. And what that allows you to do is just put a description of your specs in. You're still going to have to fill out all the contact information and the accounting information because that's required of every job, with the exception of the estimates and the journal article waivers. But it will let you bypass a lot of those special fields like paper types and folding and inserts and binding. We don't encourage people to use that option all the time because you miss specifications. Those questions went through a thorough vetting process and they were designed to elicit the responses that made sure that things don't get missed. But if it is something simple or repetitive, you can use that special printing and duplicating option instead of going through the full form.
You mentioned something about if our vendor is not GPO when we go outside like John Wiley, and we are responsible for submitting the article information to FDL Key.
Correct. So even if we process the waiver for you, we are not sending the journal articles to FDLP for you because we don't have access to the final product. So with our printing jobs, we have the final file. We are in that procurement process. So with the journal articles, we're just signing the waiver that allows you to go procure that from a commercial vendor, but you're the one working with that vendor to get copies or to get open access. So you're best positioned to answer any of FDLP's questions. So unless we're handling the procurement of the goods, you're responsible for FDLP. Does that make sense?
I had to ask you all these questions, but this is a new process from our office, and I want to make sure that we do it right. So a lot of the authors may submit a draft of their article to a particular vendor, and from what I understand, the author has to wait for the vendor to accept the article for publication. Now, sometimes the vendor requires the author to make changes to the original draft that they submitted, which brings the cost sometimes up because the cost of the words may increase. So how does this process deal with that? Because once it goes through and you all send it to GPO and they say, okay, we're going to do the publication, but then it has to be modified, the article has to be modified, and the cost increase. How does that work?
So the question is, if a journal is sent to a vendor in draft form and the vendor works through acceptance, and then the cost change, how is that handled? My follow-up question would be, do they normally charge you before the article is accepted?
No.
Okay, so the answer was no. Some not. So if they're not giving you an invoice until it's been accepted and priced out, then I would wait until it's been accepted and priced out to get your journal article waiver. You don't need that until you're ready to purchase. Beyond that, I would email the NOAA.printing box and we'll issue an amended waiver if the cost changes.
Did you specify the intent to pay or intent to charge form that the vendor will submit to you something like a quote or estimate of an invoice?
Yeah, so the question was if the vendor's intent to charge counts as the invoice or estimate, and the answer would be yes.
Question online?
Yes.
Speaking of open access, there is no printing involved, and the journal manuscript will only be online as open access. Do we still need to complete a waiver to purchase, or is it just a notice of intent to publish?
So you need to do both. And if it's only online, you don't have to go through the whole intent to publish. There's something called document discovery. You can file through intent to publish and they'll give you the information on that. But no, if you are using appropriated funds, even for open access of a journal online, we still require the waiver.
I have a question. So some journals require a fee just to submit, not even knowing whether this piece would be accepted for publication. Is there a waiver that needs to be completed at that point in time? Or does the waiver only need to be completed once it's accepted for publication?
I might defer to you on that one, Angela.
Sure.
So the question was whether you need a waiver just to submit. Some vendors charge you to submit before it's accepted. And Angela McCorkle, the printing officer, said, for now, our answer is going to be only once it's accepted and ready for publication will you need a waiver. We'll research that, discuss it, and if we need to, we'll publish new guidance on our webpage.
Got another question online.
Okay.
Can you address 3D printing?
Yes.
How will we go about getting prices? Who do we use? Does this go through GPO, etc.?
That is actually a question that's come up frequently. So 3D printing is kind of a misnomer. It has been classified by GPO as manufacturing and not printing. Therefore, it falls outside of our purview. So you can procure that through normal acquisition channels because it's classified as manufacturing and not printing.
All right, any other questions in the audience or online? All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today, and really appreciate you answering all of our questions.
All right. Thanks, guys, for coming down. And like I said, my contact information is on the slideshow. If you need anything, please let me know.
Thank you.